On now to Detroit's historic bankruptcy case, problems so monumental that the U.S. bankruptcy court judge just tasked a consulting team to follow the case. Since the filing, that plan has pitted pensioners and retirees against bondholders and financial institutions in a bitter battle over who will emerge the least scathed by Detroit's debt. There is, however, another group of people who have been forgotten in that fight. Creditors who stand to become casualties of the city twice over through no fault of their own, and with little means to do anything about it. Azmat Khan reports in this America Tonight investigation.
1, 2.
Why do kids do that?
Why you shine up?
This may look like an ordinary family moment, but for Dwayne Provience, it's a small pleasure he was denied for almost a decade while in prison for a murder he didn't commit.
Look, show 8. Where 8 at?
It's a nightmare that began 14 years ago.
I thought I was getting pulled over for a traffic stop. I looked through my rearview mirror. I seen cops jumping out the car with guns raised up at my car. Told me to keep my hands on the steering wheel. Next thing I know, I'm getting snatched out the car.
Detroit police had arrested Dwayne for the murder of a local drug dealer named Renee Hunter.
I didn't know nothing about Renee Hunter, never met him before in my life, so I just thought this was all a big mistake, and I just thought this was going to get cleared up in about a day or two.
Instead, the case went to trial.
Can you state your name, please?
Larry Javon Wiley.
Larry Wiley, the prosecution's only witness, was a homeless man who did handiwork in Dwayne's neighborhood. He accused Dwayne 3 months after the murder, when police arrested him for a break-in. His testimony, though inconsistent, was enough for a jury.
I just heard guilty, a second-degree murder, and after that, it's like everything went blank to me. You know, it was like an out-of-body experience.
Dwayne, a 26-year-old father of 3 who'd never been to prison before, was sentenced to between 32 and 62 years.
It was very, very, very hard. You know, it was very hard. You know, I broke down plenty of times in prison. I'm scratching my head. I say, wow, by the time I get out, my kids is going to be grown, have kids on their own. Is this reality for me?
Dwayne appealed his conviction with no result. But then a group of law students from the University of Michigan Innocence Clinic got involved. They discovered original police notes that contradicted key witness testimony. These notes never got to the prosecution or Dwayne's defense team.
This is evidence that shows that the person who's been arrested didn't do it. It's exculpatory evidence, or something that might impeach the credibility of a witness.
Wolfgang Mueller is Dwayne's civil attorney.
So if that had been used in the trial, do you think Dwayne would have been convicted?
No, I think, frankly, if the prosecutor had seen it, the prosecutor would have dismissed the case. That's how powerful that was. Had they been turned over to Dwayne's defense counsel, even a rookie lawyer could have gotten an acquittal in that case.
And there was another important revelation from the key witness, Larry Wiley.
Can you tell us what happened on March 24, 2000 at Pembroke Avenue and Greenfield Road?
No, I can't. I wasn't there.
Not only that, Wiley made a startling charge. He said he was coached by the Detroit police officer leading the investigation. Soon afterwards, a judge threw out Dwayne's conviction. So after nearly a decade in prison, Dwayne Provience was free.
It was one of the most happy days of my life. It was a day that I was just always dreamed of, that one day I would be able to walk out these doors.
But the city he returned to was completely different from the Detroit he remembered.
When I got out of prison, it was like a big culture shock to me. It was like, wow, what the hell happened? You know, like somebody dropped a bomb on the city.
He began putting his life back together and found a lawyer to sue the city and the officer who led the investigation. In the summer of 2011, a settlement panel looked at his case.
That panel, with a collective experience of probably 70 years, doing nothing but civil rights cases, decided the case was worth $5 million.
The city rejected the amount, so the case was headed for more negotiation or into court for a trial.
So we was like right there at the goal line.
But less than a month later,
The city of Detroit has made history, but not in a good way. It's become the largest city in the U.S. to file for bankruptcy. Detroit is
With the bankruptcy, Dwayne's case stopped in its tracks. So did more than 500 other lawsuits against the city, filed by ordinary citizens with grievances, citizens with no place at the table in the high-stakes negotiations over Detroit's bankruptcy. One of them is 72-year-old Jessie Payne. Jessie is happiest when she's with her dozens of grandkids and great-grandkids. Family and church have been the mainstays for Jessie her entire life.
I haven't seen them yet. I like them.
And to get around the Motor City, she always used the bus, better known as the D-Dot. Then 2 years ago, she took the bus that changed her life.
I started across the street to go to the doctor's office. And as I started across the street, the bus backed over me and I fell to the ground. And when I looked down at my leg, it was split open. It looked like maggots was crawling in my leg.
When Jessie woke up, she was in the hospital.
I didn't feel nothing. I couldn't feel my legs. They told me they thought I was going to lose my legs.
Jessie was in the hospital for a year before moving to a rehabilitation home. Today, she undergoes physical therapy 5 days a week.
I still have pains today in my legs. I wake up a lot of nights with pain in my legs. You should see the scars.
Jessie's injury is permanent, and just before the bankruptcy, the city of Detroit had agreed to pay her.
We have several judgments in this case, all of which are affected by the bankruptcy. It's roughly $3.5 million.
Jessie's lawyers at the Sam Bernstein law firm were on their way to pick up the check when the city halted the payment. Now Jessie's money is entangled in bankruptcy law.
Right now, we have pieces of paper, essentially, that need to be converted into monetary damages for Jessie. And in the bankruptcy process, that's a very complex process. It's uncharted territory for virtually everybody involved in this.
The task of coming up with a plan for the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history falls to Kevin Orr. His job is monumental.
So the issues that we're talking about have been coming this way for 60 years.
Kevin Orr puts Detroit's debt and unfunded liabilities at a staggering $18 billion, and he's pushing an aggressive plan of cuts and investments to change that.
I don't want to do it, but I'm here to make the hard call. That's my job.
Detroit had been in decline for years, but it wasn't until the bankruptcy that individual creditors started taking a hit. In every bankruptcy, there are losers, but in this one, some may suffer more than others.
Under the city's current plan, police officers and firefighters could get 100% of their pensions, but creditors like Jessie and Dwayne could get as little as 20%.
What would that mean for Jessie?
You know, that would mean that she wasn't fairly compensated. Jessie Payne is not a sophisticated Wall Street bank or large bondholder. She's a woman who was walking in a parking lot, got hit by a city bus, and deserves to be paid fairly.
Banks, bondholders, and pension funds, often blamed for contributing to Detroit's decline, have a seat at the negotiating table. Jessie and Dwayne, who did nothing to hurt their city, do not.
Being falsely incarcerated for something I didn't do, I didn't put the city in the situation they're in now, so I believe I think it's a little unfair.
Has the city reached out to you about negotiating or having any input in how claims like Dwayne's are being treated?
No, you can't even get a city lawyer on the phone anymore. Ever since the city of Detroit filed bankruptcy, the lawyers on the case won't return an email, won't return a telephone call. The bankruptcy lawyers won't return anybody's call, at least certainly not my call.
They didn't return our calls either. Despite repeated requests, emergency manager Kevin Orr would not comment for this story.
But they're taking meetings. I mean, they're in negotiations with bondholders and with unions and other retiree groups.
Because that's where their focus is. Pensioners have a lot of attention because of their unions, but the other people like Dwayne don't have that because they don't have a union behind them.
And Dwayne's story has another costly twist. While he was in prison, the state mistakenly continued to bill him for child support.
The only time they cut it off, I think it was like 8.5 years when I was in prison. They finally woke up and, oh, he's in prison, let's stop it. But at that time, I was in almost $100,000 in debt in child support.
Under Michigan law, he'll still owe that amount. So Dwayne's only hope is to get back what he feels the city owes him.
So right now, I'm just basically just riding the waves to see how all this is going to pan out.
If you could tell Kevin Orr anything, what would you say to him?
If I could just tell Kevin Orr anything, I know he's doing a job that he has to do to get this city back up and viable, and I applaud him for that. But if I can speak to Kevin Orr, I just let him know, give us a little more meat on the bone so, we can feel vindicated for what we went through.
As Azmat Khan reported, there are more than 500 other cases that involve lawsuits ranging anywhere from police abuse and wrongful incarceration to employment discrimination and unfair dismissals. Like Jesse Payne, who we just met in the story, many have never told their stories before publicly, and emergency manager Kevin Orr has yet to talk publicly about any of them.